In a quiet neighborhood, an elderly black man's life is shattered by a rogue police officer. The chokehold is tight, the air grows thin, and for a moment, it feels like there's no escape. But just as the officer's grip tightens, the unthinkable happens. The man's son arrives, not just any son, but a self-made millionaire with connections to the highest circles of power. You won't believe what happens next. This isn't just another case of police misconduct. This is a game changer. Stay tuned to see how one man's wealth and influence turns the tables and justice is finally served. Don't miss the twist that will leave you speechless. Subscribe now to witness the shocking power shift you didn't see coming. Jeremiah Williams had lived through a lifetime of hardship, but none of it had prepared him for the events that unfolded one quiet evening in his neighborhood. A neighborhood that, in the past, had been a symbol of community, but now felt like a distant memory. Jeremiah, 68 years old and a retired Army veteran, had seen much in his time, from the battlefield to the streets, where he had often been reminded of his place in society. Constantly underestimated, scrutinized, and oppressed. But never had he been this close to the edge of life and death. It was a Thursday evening when the incident occurred. A warm evening breeze rustled the trees lining the quiet suburban street, where Jeremiah lived alone in a modest apartment, his wife having passed away a few years ago. It wasn't much, but it was home. He'd spent his days doing odd jobs around the neighborhood, staying active, but mostly he enjoyed his solitude. That evening, as he walked back home after a quick errand to the store, he could never have imagined that his life would take a turn he couldn't control. As he turned the corner near his apartment building, Officer Harris pulled up in his patrol car. Officer Harris was young, perhaps in his late 20s, with a sharp, arrogant demeanor that radiated from his every move. He had been on the force for only a few years, but he had already earned a reputation, one that sent chills through the community. He was known for his aggressive tactics, and it was said that his encounters often escalated in ways they shouldn't. The screech of the tires caught Jeremiah's attention, and he turned to see the police car pull up beside him. The officer didn't roll down the window or greet him. He simply sat there, watching Jeremiah with an unreadable expression. It was enough to raise suspicion. Jeremiah slowed his pace, feeling the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He had been in situations like this before, where being black and in a neighborhood like his meant that any encounter with law enforcement could turn dangerous. Without warning, the officer slammed the car door open and stepped out, a heavy air of authority surrounding him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and his uniform was sharp, but it didn't mask the coldness in his eyes. "What are you doing here, old man?" Officer Harris barked, his voice carrying over the quiet street. Jeremiah's heart skipped a beat. He had been living in the neighborhood for years, but something about the officer's tone felt wrong. He hadn't done anything wrong, but there was something about the way the officer was looking at him, as if he had already judged him. "I'm just walking home from the store." Jeremiah's voice was steady, but he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in his stomach. "You sure?" Officer Harris's voice grew sharper, a predatory edge to his words. "You seem like you're up to something." Jeremiah stood there, trying to maintain his composure. He was used to the suspicion, the unnecessary questioning, but this was different. The officer's eyes were filled with something far worse than just authority. They were filled with anger, something visceral. Jeremiah had seen that look before, in the eyes of people who didn't think he belonged in their world. Before he could respond, the officer took another step forward, closing the distance between them. "I'm talking to you. Answer me." The officer's hand hovered near his holster, as though ready to escalate the situation without reason. Jeremiah's instinct screamed to move away, to retreat, but there was nowhere to go. Then, without any further provocation, the officer grabbed Jeremiah by the collar, shoving him roughly against the hood of the car. Jeremiah's groceries spilled onto the pavement as he struggled to regain his balance, but the officer's grip only tightened. You think you can just walk around here like you own the place? Officer Harris sneered. His voice was growing louder, his anger becoming more evident. This is my neighborhood now, and you're not welcome here. Jeremiah's pulse quickened as the officer's weight pressed down on him. This wasn't just an arrest. This wasn't about a simple conversation. The officer was trying to break him, to show him his place in this world. And Jeremiah was about to let that happen. But before he could react, the officer slammed his forearm across Jeremiah's throat, cutting off his air supply. A wave of panic flooded over him as he felt his chest tighten and his vision blur. The officer's chokehold was unrelenting, his breath ragged with exertion as he leaned into the hold. Just as Jeremiah's world was about to go dark, a loud voice shattered the moment. Let him go. The voice was filled with authority and force, cutting through the haze of panic and struggle. Who was this man? Was this the end for Officer Harris, or had the tides finally shifted? What was the connection between this man and Jeremiah? Jeremiah Williams couldn't breathe. The life was draining out of him. His vision blurred as the grip on his throat tightened, his lungs screaming for air that wasn't coming. He had fought in wars, survived countless battles, and endured years of oppression, but this was different. This was pure hate. His heart raced, thudding in his chest as he struggled to get air. But then, the unexpected happened. A loud voice, firm and commanding, cut through the tension. Let him go. The voice was full of power, the kind of voice that demanded attention. It was so sudden, so strong, that Officer Harris momentarily released his grip, glancing over his shoulder in confusion. Jeremiah took a ragged breath, gasping for air as his hands instinctively moved his throat, trying to loosen the choking pressure. The world spun, but he could feel the change, the shift. The officer's focus wavered, and in that moment, Jeremiah knew something had changed. Standing just a few feet away was a man, tall and imposing. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his expression a mixture of anger and concern. The officer's face drained of color as he saw who had arrived. This wasn't just some passerby. This wasn't someone the officer could ignore. This was someone powerful. Let him go. Now. The man's voice rang out with authority. There was no hesitation. He spoke with the kind of confidence that came with knowing the game, knowing how the system worked, and knowing how to make it bend to his will. This wasn't just anyone. This was Malcolm Williams, Jeremiah's son. Malcolm wasn't just a successful businessman. He was a millionaire, a self-made tech mogul, and one of the most influential people in the country. But more importantly, he had connections that could bring about change, real change, in ways that most people could only dream of. Officer Harris stepped back, clearly shaken, but he was still unsure of what to do. Malcolm's eyes never left the officer. His voice was calm, but there was a clear edge to it that suggested this wasn't a negotiation. It was an ultimatum. "Do you know who I am?" Malcolm asked, his gaze never faltering. The officer hesitated, then stammered, "Why, yes, sir, but I..." "Good." Malcolm cut him off. "Then you know what happens when someone like you put your hands on my father." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of what they meant. Officer Harris had made a grave mistake, one he couldn't undo. Jeremiah, still gasping for breath, slowly pushed himself off the car, his hand shaking as he rubbed his throat. The taste of fear and anger lingered in his mouth. But there was something else too, something more powerful, relief. Malcolm moved toward his father, his eyes filled with concern. "Dad, are you okay?" Jeremiah could barely speak, his throat raw from the chokehold, but he nodded. "I'm fine, son, but that cop..." "Don't worry about him," Malcolm interrupted. He turned back to Officer Harris, who was still standing frozen, unsure whether to escalate the situation or retreat. "You've made a terrible mistake, officer. Malcolm's tone was colder now, more dangerous. "This won't end well for you." Officer Harris's face was a mixture of anger, embarrassment, and fear. He had underestimated Jeremiah, thinking that the elderly black man was an easy target. What he didn't know was that he was up against someone far more powerful than himself. Someone with the means and connections to bring down the full weight of the law and beyond. "You don't know who you're messing with," Malcolm continued. "My father may be the one you try to hurt, but you'll regret this when I'm done with you." Malcolm's words weren't just a threat. They were a promise. As the two men faced off, the realization hit Officer Harris like a cold wave. He had made a mistake. A mistake that was about to cost him everything. But he still had no idea just how deep the consequences would run. Malcolm turned to the crowd of onlookers who had gathered, sensing the tension in the air. "Everyone, get back to your homes, please. There's no reason to stay here any longer." His voice had authority, but there was a calmness to it, an assurance that whatever happened next, he was in control. The crowd dispersed slowly, but it was clear that the incident had shaken everyone. People had seen it all. The way Officer Harris had treated the elderly black man, the way he had tried to suffocate him without cause, and now they were witnessing the power of Malcolm's connections firsthand. "Get in the car, Dad. We're going to the station." Malcolm's voice was firm, but there was a protective softness underneath it. Jeremiah hesitated for a moment, still processing what had just happened, but finally nodded and made his way to the car. The reality of the situation was settling in. This wasn't just about the attack anymore. It was about something bigger, something that had been brewing in the system for years. As Malcolm got into the car with his father, he dialed his private phone line. It was a direct connection to the FBI chief, Richard Gray, someone Malcolm had known for years. He didn't need to say much. The connection spoke for itself. The name Malcolm Williams carried weight, and it was clear that the FBI chief had no intention of letting this incident slide. "Richard, it's Malcolm." His voice was steady. "I need you to take care of something. A cop just attacked my father, and we're not letting it go. I want this handled. Now." What happened next was far from over. Officer Harris may have thought he could walk away from this unscathed, but Malcolm's power was just beginning to show. Would the FBI chief's involvement be enough to get justice for Jeremiah? And would Officer Harris pay the ultimate price for his actions? Or was there a far more sinister system at play? Malcolm Williams sat in the back seat of his sleek black car, watching the world outside pass by in a blur. His mind was sharp, calculating, already running through every possible outcome. Jeremiah, his father, sat silently beside him, his face tired but resolved. The bruises on his neck from the chokehold were a stark reminder of the night's events. But his spirit wasn't broken. It wasn't just a physical pain that hurt. It was the humiliation, the sheer injustice of it all. Malcolm clenched his jaw as he stared out the window, his thoughts filled with one word: retribution. The officer, Harris, had pushed too far this time. He thought he could get away with harassing his father, an elderly black man, simply because he held the badge. He was wrong. Malcolm's phone rang. He didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. It was Richard Gray, the FBI chief, the man Malcolm had known for years, and the one person who could turn this entire situation on its head. "Malcolm." Richard's voice came through, calm and authoritative. "I've already put the wheels in motion. You don't have to worry. Harris will be taken care of." Malcolm felt the familiar rush of control flood his body. Richard Gray was a man who could bend the law to his will, but he was also a man of integrity. When he said something would be done, it would be. "I appreciate it, Richard," Malcolm said, his voice steady. I want this handled swiftly. I want him exposed. He'll never work again, and I want the world to know the real story. It's already in motion. You don't have to worry. We got the evidence we need. Richard paused before adding, "This will be a big case. Bigger than you think. It's going to change things." Malcolm hung up, his gaze still locked on the streets outside, but his thoughts were elsewhere, on the bigger picture. Officer Harris had been summoned to the station. He walked into the building, his head down, his steps slow. He had no idea what was about to hit him. When he entered the interrogation room, he was greeted by not one, but two FBI agents who were waiting for him. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with tension. Harris had hoped for some respite, some kind of explanation for what had just transpired. But instead, he was about to face the full weight of Malcolm Williams' influence. One of the agents stood up, and Harris could tell by their stern expression that this wasn't just a normal procedure. "You've been a part of something much bigger than you realize, officer," the agent said. Harris frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" "The incident with Mr. Williams," the agent continued, "is only a small piece of the puzzle. You've been working with a network of officers involved in illegal activities, misuse of police power, corruption. You're being investigated for far worse than you know." Harris's face drained of color. He had thought his actions would go unnoticed. He had been just another officer with a problematic reputation. But now, he was at the center of a massive investigation, one that could ruin his career and everything he had worked for. "We've already got the evidence we need," the agent said coldly. "Your involvement in several illegal activities has been documented. This was your tipping point. The attack on Mr. Williams was a catalyst." The next day, the news was all over the television and the internet. A press conference was held with Richard Gray, the FBI chief, standing at the podium. Beside him stood Malcolm Williams, his face calm and composed, but his eyes full of fire. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, his voice clear and authoritative, "what we are here to announce today is a breaking story involving one of our own. Officer Harris, a member of the local police force, has been under investigation for corruption, abuse of power, and misconduct." The crowd of reporters shifted, murmuring amongst themselves as the shocking news spread like wildfire. "This is a case that should never have happened," Richard continued, his eyes scanning the room. "Officer Harris used his badge as a weapon, targeting and harassing an elderly man simply because of his race. This behavior is unacceptable in any law enforcement capacity, and we are committed to rooting out corruption wherever it exists." Malcolm stepped forward, his face now visible on every screen across the country. "What happened to my father," he paused, his voice steady but fierce, "was not just an attack on him. It was an attack on every black man and woman who has faced a systemic abuse of power for far too long." Malcolm's words hung in the air, cutting through the noise. His influence was undeniable. "I'm here to ensure that justice is not just done, but seen to be done. This is the beginning of a new chapter for our country, one where the corrupt are held accountable and the oppressed are heard. We will not back down." Officer Harris was arrested shortly after the press conference, and his story began to unravel in the public eye. The scandal spread like wildfire, causing waves of outrage and demand for accountability. The FBI's investigation into the corruption within the police department exposed a network of officers involved in illegal activities, and Harris was just the tip of the iceberg. But the story didn't stop there. Malcolm Williams wasn't just a man seeking retribution for his father. He was now at the forefront of a movement for systemic change. His connections and wealth had made this possible, but it was a commitment to justice that made him unstoppable. In the days that followed, mass protests erupted, calling for police reform and justice for victims of racial injustice. The name Jeremiah Williams became a symbol for the cause. What had started as a single attack on an elderly man had now grown into a nationwide movement. The fight for justice wasn't over. It was only just beginning. This story shows us the power of justice, courage, and standing up against the system. Malcolm Williams fought not just for his father, but for every person who has been wronged by those meant to protect us. His wealth and connections gave him the opportunity to expose the truth, but it was his unshakable belief in what's right that made all the difference. The fight for justice is ongoing, and every victory is a step towards making the world a better, fairer place for all. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire change, ignite action, and push for a world where justice truly prevails.